Hi, I'm Pete, and welcome to Just a Few Acres Farm. Today I'm tearing into the transmission of my Farmall 756, and I have two goals in mind: to find what parts are needed to fix the parking pawl or the parking brake, this little hook thing here, and to figure out why the shifting is so sloppy and order the parts to tighten that up. I took the platform off here to expose the linkages for the shifting. Shifting linkage, shifting linkage, shifting linkage up in there. And this is the linkage for the parking pawl going down into the range transmission here. I messed up in the last MCV video talking about the transmissions. This tractor has multiple transmissions and I got them in the wrong order. First you've got the clutch, the main clutch here. And then you have the power shift mechanism that's alongside the MCV valve inside the torque amplifier. That's what that is in this part. Then you have the regular speed transmission right behind that that's got 4 different gears in it, 4 different gear selections. Behind that, you have a range transmission that handles low speed or low range, high range, and reverse range. And then behind that, you've got the differential and the bull gears and that whole assembly. Much more complicated than the old letter series Farmalls that I'm used to working on. From up here in the tractor seat, hopefully I can show you how this works. So here's the gear selector, the shifter here. We've got neutral, high, and low range and reverse range here on this lever. So shift into low, shift into high range, and then if you take a bend here, it goes into reverse. If you look at the linkages down here on top of the range transmission, which is this rectangle, that's low, that's high range, and then if I turn the lever over and put it into reverse range, it actuates this other guy here. And what you have under these is just forks sliding gears back and forth, just like in any other simple tractor transmission. So I can pick whatever range I want: high range forward, low range forward, or reverse. Once I've picked my range, say I'm in low range, I can pick how fast I want to go, gears 1, 2, 3, 4. See, I can even do that in reverse. I have 4 reverse gears going all the way along this side. And when I work that 1, 2, 3, 4 lever, it turns that post up in the speed transmission. I hope you can see it. It's rotating. And it's engaging 2 forks that are down there in the speed transmission to slide gears back and forth. In addition to this range and, reverse range and all these gears on this side, I've got the power shift on this side, the torque amplifier. So whatever gear I'm in, forward or reverse, with this lever back, I'm going a little over half speed. And then I can shift on the fly to the faster speed that way without pushing in the clutch. In my parking pawl actuator here, boy, it's so much easier to just call it parking brake. You put this down, and as you put it down, you'll see that linkage sends a plunger down into the speed or the range transmission. Plunger up, plunger down. But when I go to put the tractor in park and I pull that lever down, nothing happens. No grinding, no clicking, no held in place, nothing. So I'm not sure what's going on there. In addition to the problems I have with the parking pawl not working, I also have considerable sloppiness in these levers, such that when you're driving the tractor in the field, you kind of have to wiggle the lever around to get it in the right spot. And sometimes it's hard to get in gear because there's so much slop and you don't know exactly where you are. And when I pulled the cover off, some of that slop was immediately evident. See how much slop there is there? And that's just in the pin in the clevis here, and those are pretty easy to fix. Usually I'll just drill them out to the next larger size and put a larger pin in. That's pretty simple to fix. I've also got slop on this end of the linkage, back in here under this cover, whereas I can wiggle these levers and look down at the linkages down below, and I'm doing all that wiggling. I can wiggle it that far before I see any movement on the linkages down on the transmission cover. Yep, this is not an uncommon problem for these tractors. After all, it's 54 years old, same age as me. Things get a little loose after a while. The heat's on. It's cold outside, I need heat. We're going to pull this range transmission cover off, and the first step in that is undoing these linkages that work into the cover. Where's that cotter pin? There's two. Here's one pin. That rod comes out. It's oblong down the holes. Just a little bit. And it only takes a little bit added up over multiple connections to make a lot. Oblong and lots of wear on the pins. It's a combination of the two. Oblong hole and worn pin. On this side of the case we have to undo the park lock linkage. Park lock, that's a better term than parking brake and a little more accessible than parking pawl. It's the park lock. Oops. Oh, come out of there. I'm trying to help you. Make you work again. That's not a pry bar. This is a pry bar. We gotta take this spring off. There we go. Get these wires out of the way. You can just go right back there. Pull the dipstick out. I don't want that hanging down when I pull the cover off. Well, that one wasn't very tight. Well, let's see if we can crack this cover loose. Gotta get under it. Hey. You're in my way too. I thought you would sneak out one way or the other. Now how about it? There we go. What have we got in here? Well, this is the range transmission. This is low and high range. This fork controls low and high range. And then this gear back here is the reverse gear. And the parking pawl rides or seats into these teeth here. You can see where there's some wear from it getting engaged in the past. Well, maybe the gear was still spinning a little bit. Down there we've got an oil passage which runs from, I believe, the main hydraulic pump back there up to the filter here, so that's suction for the main hydraulic pump. And then over on this side, this round shaft here with the splines in it is where the other shifter comes on and controls reverse. There's a reverse idler gear set down in there, and then it engages or disengages this gear. At least that's how I understand it. This tube here, I think, comes back from the torque amplifier or back from the MCV and lubricates the rear end, the differential and final drive gears. These kinds of things happen with a lot of use. You can see where the shifter fork is, or the shifter end has worn into this right here and created a little bit of slop. But the spline shaft looks fine. Here's the lid. This is the reverse selector here, and this is the low-high selector, and this is the park pawl. And if you look at the underside, here's the reverse gear selector, and it just has a simple spring-loaded detent here. It seems nice and tight. No problems there. And then on the low-high selector, you've got the same kind of thing going on. And I can see some wear in there, but it still locks in the detents pretty good. I don't know. I'll have to think about that one. This long thing here is the parking pawl, and this right here seats in between the teeth of the rearmost gear in the case. When it gets pushed like this, it seats in there. And there's nothing wrong with it. I mean, the end of it's got a little chipping on it, but nothing that wouldn't make it work right. So what happened here is one of the things that often happens with these, from what I've read, and that is, here's the linkage that goes on to this. Let me turn it here. Here's a linkage that goes on to this, and if somebody stopped the tractor and it's not in quite the right position for this pawl to sit down in between the teeth, and you ram on the handle too much, you wind up bending this linkage, and then it won't work at all after that because it doesn't extend down far enough to engage with the gear. So I believe that's what happened. So I can reuse the pawl. There's nothing wrong with it in here, but I'm going to get an improved linkage. It's actually got a spring in here, so you can pull the lever down to put it in park even when it's not quite in the right spot to drop in between teeth on the gear, and the spring will keep pressure on it so that if the tractor rolls a little bit, then it'll pop down in between the teeth and seat, and you're all set to go without ever bending this thing again. Now we'll see how much further we have to go. So with the gear selector, the outside lever, there's almost no play in that. And what play that I do see is down in the forks and the linkages in the transmission itself, and I'm not getting into that right now. Not this winter. Let's look at the range now. If I hold the plates that the range rotates down here, I've got a lot of play up top. This is the lower high speed range. See all that? That's all that without the lever moving up top. And this is the reverse plate here. That's not nearly as bad. In order to see the linkages better, we'll take this cover off, which wraps around in this gear shifter cover. Torque amplifier lever, you gotta come off. These knobs gotta come off. This cover's gotta come off. There's one screw here holding this on. Let's look and see what we got going on here. Wiggle stuff, see what wiggles and see what doesn't. Let's start with the range lever. Coming down from the lever, first of all, there's a little paddle that goes in this slot here and works it. And there's play in there. About that much. And it's the same in the reverse. This is the low and the high selector, and then over here is the reverse selector. And this paddle travels between the two and selects which one you're going to work. I've got some play in there. See it moving right there. And if we take the whole thing as an assembly here and hold on where it goes down to the transmission, we've got some wobble on that shaft there, and then we've got some wobble in this bolt here, which is a shoulder bolt. It's got a shoulder that goes down through this and then screws into the collar. So we got movement all over the place on this one. Now if we look at the speed selector, that doesn't do anything over here. It's just turning a shaft that cuts through, and that shaft cuts through over to here. If we work that, yeah, that's an easy replacement. The other thing to look at is these plates here, because these are what work the rods that go into the range transmission. And this is a fixed connection right here, so I'm not going to get any play on the shaft that goes up through. It's a shaft in a shaft kind of deal. And then if I look at my parking pawl linkage, which is right here, and these are those two paddles I was just showing you on the other side. This is the reverse paddle that I'm turning here. And then if I come over and catch the low and high paddle, when they're lined up like that, I'm in neutral here. And when that happens, I have my parking pawl all set in place and things are all out of whack here. But this little piece of the parking pawl will slide up into here and lock everything in neutral so that when it's in park, you can't engage the gears. And similarly, if you're not in neutral before you try and engage park, these don't line up and you can't put it in park. So I get that rotational looseness in this shoulder bolt right here or in this bracket. Let's take that off, or let's actually first see if it tightens at all, because it won't, because it's a shoulder bolt. But we can take it off and see what's going on. It's not like you've been on there for 54 years or anything. You should come right out. Oh, wait a second. You have been on there for 54 years. It could be 55 years at this point. You know, your birthday may be earlier than mine. Mine's not till October. Oh, what's this thing called? I don't remember. Anyway, it doesn't look worn to me. I mean, the lines on it are still straight. I don't see any differential wear on it. It's not like it's worn down to a nubbin down in here where it engages, but this shoulder bolt right here, and that's a shoulder bolt, it's got a lot of rotation on it. That can be fixed by probably putting in a new shoulder bolt and maybe drilling this out a little bit and putting a thin bushing in there to tighten it up some. I'm not sure how big of a deal that is. Gonna have to think about that one. This here is where the end of that gear shift pin rides in, and if I had to guess the wears on these, I can see where they've lipped up and worn. That collar on there has got a lot of rotation, this whole assembly here. It's very loose. This one, on the other hand, the reverse selector, well, that's a little loose, but it's clear that the low-high is the one that got all the action through life. It's the most worn. Might as well pull this apart and see what exactly we got going on in here. Well, that's interesting. Now we can see this is the reverse shifting lever, that we've got a similar connection down there that's got quite a play in it. So that makes 3 of those guys. And then, I don't know what the deal is with this. We're going to have to keep going. Now this should come off. This thing's dry as a bone, but there's grease circ down here, which is really hard to get at without taking some sheet metal off, but that needs to be greased. And here's that worn area where the shifting feeler goes in. And then I've got wear on the inside of this, which makes it wobble on the shaft. And I've got wear on this guy here. Next we have this spacer collar. Yeah. Been a long time since that was greased, for sure. And then we've got this guy, which has got a lot of wobble on it. With this one we see the same thing. We've got some play in this, although this one looks like it may have been replaced. Looks kind of new, but it's still got play in it. While we're in there, we'll replace that. And then we've got the same deal going on here where this is kind of wallowed out and turns on the shaft like it should not. And we have wear in here just like the other one. Meant to do that too. That's obviously, that's not all wear. It's meant to have a shoulder in it like that, but it's worn. I'm not sure if that's a bushing in there or what. I'm going to have to look at the parts manual. Here's the parts manual page. It shows all the parts of the speed selector linkage and the range selector linkage. And I can go through and just get the part numbers for the things I need, but depending on what's available and how much it is, we need that, we need that, we need that shoulder bolt, we need that, we need that, we need that. I can fix these myself with new pins and by enlarging the holes here to tighten those up. And I noticed something kind of interesting about these two pieces here. These two pieces are this piece and this piece, and if you look on the diagram here, there's a little clip on both of them. And when I took it apart, I thought, well, what's that bolt up there for? And that's to house that clip, which comes in and wraps around the selector pin, the thing that I keep forgetting the name of, and holds it in place when you have it in one spot or another. The pin grabs it, and those are completely gone, broke off, so I need a set of those too. The more I look, the more I see. This diagram shows these as being one piece as well. But when I look at this, it's two-piece. It's actually bolted on there. And then you can just replace this end of it, I guess. Same deal with that one. This comes off, and then you replace this. And there you have it, another can of worms opened. I'm going to have to do some research on parts availability, and we'll go from there. I hope this video was informative and entertaining. I'll see you next time.